We will use Lesson 1 as a lengthy introduction presentation to present the format of each and every following lesson. Then we will return to the beginning of Lesson 1 for the actual, shorter Hebrew-English lesson presentations. Please turn to the first lesson titled Lesson 1, Mark chapter 14 and verse 36. Each lesson begins with the lesson number. Then the scripture reference is given in English. Then to the far right, the same scripture reference is given in Hebrew letters, but without the vowel markings or symbols. Remember, Hebrew words are spelt and read from the right to the left. The Hebrew pronunciation for Mark is Marcus, which, as you can see, has 5 Hebrew letters. The 2 letters that follow are the 2 Hebrew letter numeric values. The first letter on the right stands for the number 10, and the second letter on the left stands for the number 4. These 2 numbers added together make 14. Now notice the Hebrew numbering system only translates the chapter number, which is chapter 14, but the verse number is given in English, which is also referred to as the Arabic numbering characters. This is the common way Scripture verses are referenced. Notice the English or Arabic numbering system is not read from the right to the left, but from the left to the right. Verse 36, therefore, even when reading in Hebrew, is read from the left to the right. Only Hebrew letters and numbers are read from the right to the left. You may want to refer to the alphabet page and follow the number value column to locate these numbers and their corresponding Hebrew letters to familiarize yourself with this Hebrew numbering system. Now let's turn our attention to the first 4 rows, each of which is a double-height row. Notice this block of 4 rows has one title for each row. The first row is titled Hebrew Transliteration. These are the Hebrew words for Mark 14:36, spelt out phonetically in English, also called Roman letters. This method of converting a language pronunciation directly from one language to another, when the alphabets of the 2 languages differ, is called a transliteration. The numbers to the left of this transliterated text are simply used to keep the text orderly and have nothing to do with the actual scripture reference, which in this case is chapter 14 and verse 36. The second row in this first block of 4 rows is titled Hebrew. This is simply Mark 14:36 in Hebrew, read from right to left with the vowel markings or symbols and normal punctuation marks, such as commas and quotation marks. The verbs are again underlined. The third row in this block of 4 rows is titled Literal Translation. Unlike English, Hebrew adjectives commonly follow the nouns they modify. Therefore, the order of words in a sentence may be much different from a common English ordered sentence. This literal translation converts the Hebrew words to English, but retains the Hebrew order of these words. Additional definitions or translation possibilities are sometimes listed, enclosed in parentheses, and follow the primary translation. Again, the verbs are underlined. The fourth or last row of this 4-row block is titled Modern Translation. This is simply the scripture reference Mark 14:36 in today's English Bible version. Again, the verbs are underlined. Each lesson in this book follows this format of 4 corresponding titled rows in a single block. The second block of rows has 5 columns. The first column on the left is titled Greek. The most ancient manuscripts found to date of the New Testament are in Greek. A popular concordance of the Bible is called the Strong Concordance, which assigns a number to each Hebrew and Greek word in the Bible for easy referencing. This first column titled Greek shows the Strong Concordance reference number that corresponds to the Greek word used in this particular scripture reference. The second column, titled Hebrew, is again the Strong Concordance reference number, but for the Hebrew equivalent of the Greek word in this particular scripture reference. These numbers may help those who wish to do a comparative study between Greek and Hebrew words or phrases in the Old and New Testaments. The third column is titled Transliterated Vocabulary, which again is simply the Hebrew word written in English, sometimes referred to as Roman lettering. Notice the verbs are again underlined. Also, each word is presented beginning from the top of the column to the bottom. in order of occurrence in the Scripture. The next column to the right is titled English Definition. This is a short definition of the equivalent word or words that closely interpret the Hebrew word. Many words, when translated to another language, may give only partial implication of the true meaning. And on the other hand, the translated word may mean something a little too broad to be an exact translation. Therefore, the process of translation is give and take. One translation may overemphasize slightly the meaning, while another may de-emphasize slightly the true meaning. Sometimes a word can be more exactly translated by adding words, but then, in the attempt, become burdensome and lose the simplicity of the actual Hebrew word. For our purposes, we will stay as simple as possible and sometimes include a possible alternate or additional translation within parentheses. Therefore, do not be surprised if you find a word translated one way in one Scripture and translated by another word in a different lesson or Scripture. This is in an attempt to be as accurate and as simplistic as possible. Notice again, the verbs are underlined. The last column in this second block of columns is titled Hebrew Vocabulary. This is the actual Hebrew word in Hebrew characters or letters, with the vowel markings and symbols included. Again, the verbs are underlined. The third block and last block of columns is an additional study. Most of these additional studies at the end of each lesson are verb studies. Some may be pronoun, suffix, or prefix studies. There is commonly only one block of additional studies, but sometimes there are two blocks of additional studies. This particular study in Lesson 1 is an additional verb study that uses the two verbs that have been underlined throughout the lesson. In Hebrew, the spelling and pronunciation of each word differs depending on several factors such as tense, gender, and its relation to plurality or singleness. These additional studies are optional studies not directly related to the Scripture reference used in each lesson. Now to begin the Hebrew lessons audio presentation. We will begin all lessons by reading the lesson number and the Scripture reference in English. Then the Hebrew Scripture will be read one line at a time, followed by the English Modern Translation one line at a time. Then each Hebrew word will be pronounced, followed by the English definition. Please look again to the beginning of Lesson 1.